Peace on earth. Ethan Indigo Smith here. Something I've been meaning to do was the following: make a little recital of a recent article on the and gotta love this picture from the creation of Orwell's Animal Farm. And I'm sure it might remind people of many different leaders. I realize I just looked at the first paragraph. I went a little bit hard. I should have been maybe perhaps a little bit more concealed as far as my opinion on the matter. Um, but maybe it's also time that you know reckoning for shitty opinion is the occurrence. So Animal Farm, Orwell, a must read. Also, 1984, the original one, a great creation. But the movie, the animation is a great movie as well. Both of them are excellent movies of the books. Animal Farm in 1984. I wrote this article. I kind of was only going to go in a certain direction with it at first. And as it kind of panned out, it turned into a little bit more direct. And one could say, even for lack of a better term, confrontational. Because I realized that I was describing when America was great. And this is used as hyperbolic bullshit in today's terms. But I looked at it in just historical aspects and found that what the direction I was kind of going with this article is that people have low reading skills, low reading orientation, and thus low comprehension and interpretation of reality levels. And I went by way of history when actually the highest time period of literacy was in the country. And that's when I proposed America was great. Is we're not necessarily not great anymore, but at our peak greatness, it was at peak literacy. So, by way of looking at things that way, I found the greatness when it was, and also I really had to call out the manure of the concept behind this making America great. Hollow hyperbole. All right, I'm just gonna read through it. Also, another reason for making this video is because before the vid, I had a website that had a broad listeners and readers and so forth, and that got squashed. And since then, my proverbial soapbox has really shrunk. So I used to be able to get my message out way easier in just writing, but now let's say that the algorithm does not work for the anti-oligarchical collectivists. Excuse me. Okay. The United States of America is a government institution and is now 250 years old. The reason I say that is because people don't have it straight as to what a nation is. It's simply an institution. All nations are institutions. The only thing that was exceptional about this country was how we were different, how we were the exception, and that would be pertaining to liberty, obviously. But let's not get it twisted. Where and what is remarkable about an institution? In the following summary of the history which led us to the state of society today, I will prove when the United States was great, why it is a former superpower of former greatness, and how to make America great again. Actually, not like the hyperbolic manure in the popularized slogan. What a young nation the United States is. The United States is a beautiful nation of amalgamation. It is a flawed nation, perhaps formerly the best nation. It is one of the most influential nations, and certainly the only superpower to ever exist, and the only superpower to have degraded into just another national power. The United States is the only former superpower on earth. Obviously, this article probably triggered a lot of institutionalists, let's just say. The United States was a superpower. It may be arguable when and if the United States of America was great, but there is no doubt in my mind that the United States was a superpower in the 1980s and early 90s. During this time period, the United States could conduct action without war and could inspire problem solving without transactional political schemes. Let that sink in. During this time period, the USSR, now Russia, the opponent in the Cold War, fell simply by way of attempted competition with a superpower. No war was required. It simply fell. Now, there were a whole series of intelligence operations to make oil no longer the blood of the communist nation that was the USSR, now Russia. But that aside, the United States just did what it did, and its only competition fell by way of trying to compete. Now, if that isn't an example of superpower, I don't know what would be. It's now 250 years since the foundation of the United States, July 4th, 1776, but not quite 250 since the advancement of the Bill of Rights, later ratified on December 15th, 1791. I would argue a much more important date, in effect, by that way, right? And it only took over 10 years for the Bill of Rights to be put forth, or they would call them reform of the Constitution. We did not have much else of the Constitution, and we did have much all else of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, of course. The Bill of Rights is the institutionalization of individual liberty, or as close as we've got thus far. And when I say we in that sentence, I mean the world, really, right? I mean, this is influenced the rest of the oligarchies of the world to step their game up to be at least by and large par with the pursuit of individual liberty that is here. And since then, we have fought to keep our liberty with many successes and many failures. The Declaration of Independence set the course and character of the United States, but it has no legal influence. It is the first, I apologize. It is the first of the documents which comprise the Trinity of Liberty. Perhaps the most important part of the Declaration of Independence is the distinction of individuals and institutions and the then institutionalized king. The Declaration of Independence defines the USA as a culture of individuals rather than institutions, or individuals supportive of institutions. So here's really the core and character of the United States right here. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. It's an institution. Continuing, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. That is new. Then, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So, continuing, we see the import of individuals over institutions here. And it is important to note that in the original draft of the Declaration, there was a renunciation of slavery among the many renunciations of the king, but it was removed. Later, the United States would fight the Civil War over the hypocritical cruelty of slavery, making institutions of individuals. That is the most overt way that it is done, is by slavery. And we see slavery continuing to this day overtly in the rest of the world, in many places of the world, overtly in the world, really, and covertly. This battle between those seeking liberty for individuals among institutions and the constrictive arrangements of institutionalized representatives has long characterized the United States as well as world history more broadly. History may be understood as the record keeping of this interplay between individuals and institutions, between liberty and oligarchy. And I'll read the following part of the renunciation of slavery from a draft of the Declaration of Independence, but just know that it was removed because Southern states refused to put it into, to refuse to support it, to refuse to support the Declaration of Independence to the King of England if they didn't remove the renunciation of slavery. And here it is. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This political warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian King of Great Britain. Man, Thomas Jefferson, draft of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, how hard hitting is that? On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence set forth on the independent, individualized character of the United States. The Constitution defined government operations. Perhaps the most character-revealing idea within the Constitution, aside from the mechanics of government, is the preamble. Missed a period, comma. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Then, 15 years later, in 1791, after much tumult between individuals and the institutionalized, the Bill of Rights was ratified. There are so many important concepts within the documents of the Trinity of Liberty that it has influenced the world, not by way of militarism or transactional exchange, simply by way of its importance and the uplifting impact of its existence. All other institutions across the world since then, all other forms of oligarchical collectivism had to adjust to its principles because people want liberty, and if they see it's possible, they're gonna want it for themselves if they're not getting it. And that's a big part of the reason why a modern present day oligarchical collectivist that is Putin invaded Ukraine, because he couldn't have those Slavic relations interacting with his Slavic relations and them seeing how good they're doing. It's a big, big part of the reasoning for the war, not the only one. Continuing. Since the foundation of the United States of America and the establishment of the Bill of Rights, the world has seen the shedding of the divine right of kings, the breaking up of colonialization, numerous wars, and the mental and physical plagues brought about thereby, including 2 world wars, several proxy wars, numerous oil wars for resource control. And more recently, we have erratic aggression expressed to neighbors, allies, and enemy collectivist states alike, and all to benefit entanglements with other nations, it would appear, Russia and Israel most notably. And despite all the specific and differentiated isms involved and the particular institutional posturing in left and right wing format to rationalize mass murder and mass repression, these different tunes are all the same dissonant melody. If we take a step back to gain fuller perspective, it is the same old story since the renunciation of slavery was removed from the Declaration of Independence. It is and was institutional repression coordination versus liberty pursuing individuals. Today, our education system is torn asunder, burned out, and federalized to ordain good workers for collectivism rather than raise individuated intelligence. Many do not even learn the character of the former superpower anymore. Ever heard of a civics class? The character that made the only superpower to have been. That is the power and potential of the individuated individual, distinct among institutions. They don't know the difference between individuals and institutions often enough. Now it would appear now it would appear that people don't even know the difference between living and breathing individuals and mechanical and bureaucratical institutions and the institutionalized thereof. The results of our degraded education system have led us to the point where ignorance rules and materialism is glorified, to the declination of unity, past the peak in the line of decline. And it is all based on the ignorance of the USA character, the power and the potential of the individuated individual among institutions. It is all based on the decline of literacy and increase of ignorance. For over 200 years, individuals in the United States knew the difference between individuals and institutions and were exemplary thereby. The result of being unaware of this goes beyond simple cultural ignorance. The United States offered rights as written in the Bill of Rights to mechanical, plundering institutions. Institutions should not have the rights of individuals, the citizens united, parentheses, really institutions united, Supreme Court decision specifically offered the rights of man to institutions. The Citizens United Supreme Court decision stated that institutions could not be prohibited from political expenditures. In other words, institutions could spend whatever they wanted on whatever institutionalized politicians they like. Since then, institutionalized political groups have supported their representatives with unlimited financial assistance. These are not the people's representatives, rather, the institutionalized representatives. And we have all noticed the increased institutionalization representation, often noted as spineless and uncooperative. But it is the institutions riding their back, leading them on. And fact that I did not include in this article, but learned recently, it used to be before the Institutions United decision, or rather the Citizens United decision, it used to be that individuals gave to candidates by way of a ratio of 10-1 to institutions. So politicians were getting money donations and so forth, their campaign and the payments of their advertisement 10-1 by way of individuals. Now it is 10-1 by way of institutions. So institutions represent 10 times the amount of money in the political theater as an individual, as individuals at large total. It went from 10-1 one way, and now it's 10-1 the other way. So the Citizens United decision is a big problem of why we have some of the wealthiest, least philanthropical people in power right now. There is a legend from Egypt about when language was first brought to life. Oh, I think I skipped a paragraph. No, I skipped a part. Here we are. The 2010 Citizens United decision gave the rights of human beings to mechanical institutions, and the Bill of Rights was designed to be applicable to human beings, sovereign and yet united together. And it took less than 250 years to dismantle critical thinking to the point we collectively do not differentiate individuals and institutions, nor the individuated and the institutionalized. Today, political organizations can manifest unlimited funds to support candidates, the philosophical equivalent of giving institutions the rights of individuals. The foundational logic stating that we should find a way to give machines rights of breathing beings is the abhorrent leap that promises more unthinking individuals and more data-oriented institutions. And all of this individual ignorance and institutional vigilance is leading to an increased toleration of technocratic, oligarchical collectivism. There is a legend from Egypt about when language was first brought to life for the pharaoh by the scribe Thoth, Tahuti. One of the lessons from this mythology is a warning that the scribe offered to the pharaoh with the invention of writing. Writing is an excellent tool, but it is also a way for the mind to become lazy. And in this laziness, there is the potential to become mentally weak and useless. And so the scribe was offering the idea that with the ability to take a note comes the likelihood you won't remember it if you don't use the writing facility properly. Now, apply that lesson to the innumerable helpful technological tools that indubitably enhance idea and discovery for some, but also lead to an exponential potential lazy and useless mentality. Now, add AI and multiple more inventions. How else can we measure this in order to counter it? And how can we prove that the United States is a former superpower and show the way to regain exceptional status? How do we make the United States great again? And when were we great? In the colonial era, many people were restricted from learning how to read, slaves and women, most notably. Literacy was still an elite skill even then. Some estimate that as few as 20% of people were literate. The literacy rates in the United States grew steadily for hundreds of years, and by the 1930s, as little as around 5% the population of the United States were illiterate. And by around 1980, the literacy rate in the United States was peaked around 99%. So peak literacy also was when the United States was at its most powerful, that its main competitor could not even compete and just fell out of the competition. 1980s was not a perfect time. It doesn't mean that there was not room for improvement, nor that there hasn't been improvement. But I'm just pointing out that it was so great by way of potentially literacy, causation. I'm not sure, but let's see. Since then, literacy rates and thus comprehension levels have steadily declined, with remarkable decrease in the last decade or two. Since around the Citizens United ruling. Could it be coincidence or connection? Well, I would posit certainly connection. The amount of corporate influence into the educational system is stark. And Mark Twain might have said it best. And extrapolate this on whatever you want, to any other number of writing and reading. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. And if you don't, you're uninformed. So since the 1980s, our literacy rate has gone down to where about 20% of the United States has the comprehension level of a fifth grader. So our literacy rates and our comprehension rates are definitely in line. And knowing this is no wonder we can't tell machine from being anymore, and will tolerate the idea that they are the same. So when was the United States great? When literacy was prevalent and rising, and in correspondence with liberty was expanded to more indiscriminately. The more you educate everyone around you, the more also you bring liberty to everyone around you. Now look what's going on. This is around the time when the United States won the Cold War. Okay. So I basically, so when did the United States lose any exemplary status it might have had yet? Still, it might have yet still had and became just another oligarchical institution when Citizens United offered human rights to institutional tools. Sad, sad day. So we took away divine right of kings, and now we have given divine right to corporation. Right back to Company John days. That was one of the most influential institutions of the world that the United States was founded on rebelling against, and it was a slave making institution, a corporation in effect, but it working for the Queen of England and the Dutch East India Company. This is a Company John, and they all had different ones. Every country had all their own little piracy that was rolled with some legitimacy. And here we are again today. We got corporate piracy going on. So, if we do not read much, we will comprehend less with greater difficulty, and we will be lied to more easily. I couldn't said it better myself. How do we become great again? Read. Raise your consciousness and read. Read with your kids. Read out loud alone and in front of others. Read to comprehend reality, to become more useful to yourself and to others. Read to save the world. The library will liberate us, or we will be another example of Thoth's warning. So you want to make the United States great again? Then read. Liberation is in the library, and liberty is in the library. Read and repeal Citizens United ruling, enabling oligarchical collectivism. Read. If you can't read, I have two people. I'm done with reading my article here, and thank you so much for those who have listened to the article. Again, I do so not to stop you from reading, but just to share with you my thoughts more so in between the lines. And look, if I would recommend to young people too, if they don't have the time and orientation to read, to educate themselves, listening to Manly P. Hall lectures and Mark Passio lectures. These are two of the most esoterically, spiritually minded and educated individuals that also, especially Mark Passio, knows the exoteric political situation up, down, and left and right. So I highly recommend young people listen to Manly P. Hall, especially for they might not get Mark Passio if they're young. And some people, I condemn them for this, but they might find Mark Passio a little bit abrasive. But if your physics teacher comes to you with knowledge, you don't worry about their abrasiveness. That applies to Mark Passio. I highly recommend Mark Passio and Manly P. Hall in the same category of greatness of their understanding of esoteric and exoteric. And I can't believe this took me that long to read the article. Peace on earth. Also, all of this is inspired by my book, The Complete Patriot's Guide, and other ideas in other books, certainly. But please support that book. Get it out there because it's got a lot of powerful ideas. I thought the world was past the needing, but it turns out we need them. Peace.